You're listening to Catalyst for Change, and my name is Jessica Huckabee, your host. I started this podcast to learn what makes people resilient after challenging events and how they've used those series of events as a catalyst for change in their life. You'll hear stories of resiliency and strength, so get ready, sit back, and be prepared to be inspired. Today I'm speaking to David Theron. Dave is the host of American Vet Podcast. He's a 4-year Marine veteran that served from 2005 to 2009, and he's a Mission 22 ambassador that started his show in an effort to battle the 22 lost a day. We'll get into more about what that Mission 22 ambassador does and the program that he serves in. And just wanted to note that the sound was not optimal during this recording, and I do apologize for that, but let's get started. All right, Dave, thanks for coming on my show, Catalyst for Change, Stories of Resiliency. I really loved listening to your podcast, American Vet Podcast, and I really want to know more about your story and what's really been the catalyst for change in your life.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for having me on the show, and I'm glad that you like the podcast. So a little bit about me. Prior to me joining the Marine Corps, I joined in '05 and I served to '09. But prior to that, when I was like 15 years old, I got emancipated, moved out of my parents' house, and I had my own apartment all the way through high school and stuff like that. So, I was just kind of living for the moment in a sense. Just had no real direction. I was belligerent. I was a smart ass. So I just had no direction. I didn't really care for my job because my mindset at the time back then was, if I go to, McDonald's or something like that, and I say, hey, 5 + 5 is 10, you're not going to give me a cheeseburger. But if I'm working, if I have cash, I can buy the cheeseburger kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I had real no direction in life whatsoever. My mom was very sick with diabetes. And
Okay.
when I got out of the Marine Corps, like my whole life, I knew I was just going to go into the military or law enforcement or something like that. It just,
Even from a young age at 15, when you got emancipated, you knew that was your path.
yeah, my grandfather is, he's my dad in a sense. I really look up to him. He's old Vietnam veteran. He actually came on my podcast, but he's got a real thick Vermont accent, so
Okay.
he's hard to understand. But for me, it's pretty easy. But he told me I've never saved any money. I'm working till I can't go any farther and anything like that. And I graduated high school. I think it was like April or May in 2001,
Okay.
and 9/11 happened, and I told my mom, I was like, listen, I'm still not doing anything with my life. This is the time for me to go if I can do anything. And she kind of told me, she's like, hey, listen, she's like, I'm not doing well. Everybody knows that. It's no secret.
Yeah.
My mom's like, I wouldn't be able to go any farther with the stress of you going. And so I kind of made a deal with my mom. I was like, all right, well, it sounds shitty, but I mean, just the way me, my mom, and my grandfather talk, we're pretty much upfront, and we know, the circle of life kind of stuff. And so I told my mom, I was like, all right, once you pass, I'll go then. And my mom was good with it.
Okay.
Luckily, I got another 3 years out of her.
Yeah.
She passed in January 2004, and it really bothered me. Because now it's just the only one I really cared about, or the only one I really talked to in the family, is my grandfather.
Yeah.
And I was close with my mom and stuff like that, but I was like, I can't go in now. I'm not going to be any good for anybody. I'm not going to be any good for myself. So
Yeah.
I gave myself some grievance time for about a year, and then I went into the Marine Corps. And it was funny too, because I called my grandfather up after I talked to the recruiter. I was like, hey, I'm joining the Marine Corps. Just talked to the recruiter. My grandfather was like, all right, he's like, that's good. He's like, but you know, don't let me down. Don't go to boot camp and come up with some bogus excuse to get out. He's like, I'll never help you out again. You know, I won't,
Yeah.
I'll disown you. He's like, but if you go down there and you have a medical reason, he's like, then that's fine. You can't handle
Yeah.
it. So he was kind of like, shit or get off the pot kind of thing with me.
Yeah.
Um, which really helped me in boot camp to have somebody to sit there and just say, hey, listen, don't be a turd.
Yeah.
And so when I was in boot camp, I ended up getting shin splints. So the Marine Corps wanted me to go, like get out and whatnot. But I was able to, you know, fix it so I can start running with boots and stuff like that again and doing marches and stuff. And so I went in boot camp in April of 2005, and I didn't get out of boot camp, Paris Island, until like November. So
Okay.
I tell people I did 2 tours in boot camp.
Yeah, just to make sure you're good to go, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah, so the fact that he told me don't do it, like if they force you out, yes, but don't take the easy road out and stuff like that, kind of really helped me work through my injuries and stuff like that, and really pushed me to be kind of like change my last name in a sense. Like there's not a whole lot of greatness when you look up my family.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
you wanted to change that.
absolutely, because I was thinking about changing my last name and all this other stuff, and I was like, no, I'm just going to change what the last name represents. And but when I told my grandfather I was going to the boot camp, my grandmother calls up my recruiter. She's like, hey, he was born with seizures and he was, he's got asthma and everything else. My recruiter calls me up and he's like,
Yeah,
hey,
geez.
he's like, is this true? And I was
Yeah.
like, well, I was like, I know I signed something saying that you can look at my medical records. I was like, is that true? And he goes, no, that's not true. It's pretty much whatever you say isn't a thing unless we find it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm like, well, you're not going to find it. So yeah, no, she's lying.
She just doesn't want you to go.
Yep,
Because at that
exactly.
time when you were going in, that was a really rough time to be in the service, it sounds like.
Yeah, '04 is really when everything really, as far as IEDs and
Yeah.
losing brothers and sisters was really the tough time.
How was
So
your experience when you went in? What did you do over there? Did you get deployed? And tell me about that experience.
yeah, so I got out of boot camp and then we go into MCT, so it's Marine Combat Training, and I meet another Marine. He's from Michigan, and he kind of told me, he's like, dude, I'm a lifer. I'm literally living in my car when I joined. And so we had MCT together. We had the same MOS, 3531 motor transport operator.
Hmm.
And after MCT, we go to the Army base, Fort Lost in the Woods or Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri for our MOS school training. And then I get my first orders to go to Okinawa, Japan for 2 years.
Okay. So you
And
go
I'm
to
like,
Japan.
yep. So I went to Japan and I was kind of nervous about that because I was like, hey, I'd never been anywhere outside of, where I live in Massachusetts. I was like, now I'm going to North Carolina. Now I'm going to, Missouri, and now I'm going to Japan. I was like, I don't know what's going to go on out there. Um, Turned out to be a great deployment for me for that 2 years. It was just the culture out there is amazing.
Yeah.
The water is phenomenal. Um, the booze was kind of expensive, so I
Yeah.
started.
That's funny.
Yeah, so I drank a lot of vodka and Red Bull because it was cheaper than a Budweiser. I was
Yeah.
out there. And then I kind of went all over the Pacific because when I got to my unit, I was the only one of age that can have, my ammo license, my hazmat license. So I can drive ammunitions and I can drive all that. And for the Marine Corps, you have to be a certain age to be able to have that, to do that. So that actually gave me a spot to where I went to, like, mainland Japan, North Korea, or South Korea, sorry. All over the place out there.
Yeah.
And that hooked me up with a nice job at Second Marine Division down in North Carolina as division licenser. So I was
Okay.
giving other Marines the license for MRAPs and stuff like that. So as far as deployments, I've never deployed anywhere that would have put my life in jeopardy.
That's good. That's good that you're
Eh,
safe, you're healthy, and you learned a lot in Japan, it sounds like, and you had a good deployment, learned a
yeah,
lot of new skills that you could bring back, moved up in rank, it sounds like. So that was a really good experience for you.
yeah. It was, but I always have that the backside of me that's kind of like, you join, big deal, but you didn't really do anything. You know what I mean? So
Mm,
I struggled with that for the longest time, and it wasn't until recently, probably like two years ago or something like that, I'm able to cope with the fact that I didn't get to do what I wanted to do, what I
what
needed to
was
do.
that?
I didn't get to go to Iraq or anything like that. So
And you really wanted to go there?
absolutely. Yeah. My
Yeah.
grandfather, like I said, he fought in Nam and everything else. And so now I kind of look at it as, yes, well, I'm better looking at it now, but before I was kind of like, yeah, I'm a Marine, but not really, in a
Mm,
sense, kind of like letting myself down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you had all these expectations that you're going to make this, your last name mean something great and,
Yep.
do all those things. And you felt like you let somebody down by not going to get deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan.
Correct.
Now, yeah. So I'm glad you came to terms with that because you did serve your country and you did amazing things and you gained all these skills and became a lot different from the 15-year-old smart ass kid, as you call him,
Yep.
that you were back in the day, So you did grow a lot, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Now, was that kind of like, your military experience, moving up in rank in the Marines? You ended up back in North Carolina. How was all that like the catalyst that changed who you are and made you who you are today? Like, how did that
Yeah.
change you?
Yeah. So when I went to Japan, I got my first divorce under my belt, like a true Marine. Um,
Hmm.
and then I met another girl, and when I was in North Carolina, I get out in 2009,
Yeah.
and then I go through my second divorce,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and then I found, I went through a real rough patch there because 2009 the economy was horrible, and
Yes.
so my grandfather, like back to my grandfather, he said, I'm going to work for the rest of my life. So I get in a car accident before I joined the Marine Corps, and I sue the guy, and I got a nice settlement out of the deal, and I opened up, an IRA for
Yeah.
myself. I was like 16 and a half or whatnot. So I'm like, oh, I got my retirement set. No matter what I'm doing when I'm 50 years old, I'm going to retire. But 2009, the economy hit, and I lost a lot of money
Yeah.
out of my IRA. And then my next divorce, and then I was still living with a lot of guilt of not doing what I should have done as a true Marine.
Yeah.
And, so then I started going down this bad road, and, I ended up, losing my job, lost my place I was living in, truck got repoed, you know,
Wow.
all, all this stuff happens. And now, one day I find myself, walking down, Wilmington Road down there and contemplating whether jumping in front of a truck or just hitchhiking out west so I can just be homeless the rest of my life because, out west you don't have to worry about cold or anything like that. So I
Yeah.
was like, I can live on the street all year.
Yeah.
Um, but the buddy I met in MCT, he went to Okinawa with me. Then when I came to Lejeune, he came to Lejeune with me, but he wasn't in the same unit. The only thing that separated us was a regular normal fence.
Yeah.
So he knew what was happening that day with me. And so he calls my grandfather up in
Mm.
Massachusetts because, he's one of the good guys, that
Yeah.
really, I mean, he's still he's a gunny now. He's got a few daughters of his own, but, um, so my grandfather calls the sheriffs, and the sheriffs end up picking me up on the side of the street. And then, so I go into like a mental ward type thing for a week.
Like a
And
5150 hold.
yeah, so that's when it really hit me. I said, I'm trying to change my last name. Yeah, I didn't get to deploy or whatnot, but
Or
if
deploy
I
where you wanted to go, where you thought you needed to go.
right, and I'm like, if I take myself out now, none of that's ever going to change.
Yeah.
That's going to be my life story. So I hit the reset button. I called my grandfather. I was like, listen, I got enough money for a bus ticket up there. Can I stay at your place for a little while? And he's like, yeah, but you're going to get a job and everything else like that. And I was like, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
So I was able to hit the reset button on my life, which ultimately made me who I am today by not deploying and
Yeah.
not doing a lot of the stuff that I wanted to do and losing everything I had.
Yeah.
So by me, a couple of years ago, I realized I said, if I deployed back when I wanted to Iraq and Afghan and all that, how good of a soldier was I going to be? How good of a troop was I going to be? A Marine, and because obviously my mental state wasn't where it needed to be if I was going to take myself out in the end, anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of how I grew to understand. Certain things happen for reasons, but that's what's helping me now understand why I didn't deploy and live with the fact that I didn't deploy like everybody else.
Yeah.
And like to this day, I still, everybody that's done combat, I look up to them, no matter their rank, no matter what they did, why they were, I don't care. I still look up to them today.
Yeah.
Um, but I started my podcast to kind
Yeah.
of,
Tell me.
yeah, to kind of tell people like, listen, if you hit that reset button in your life, it is amazing what kind of person you come to be at the end. Now I'm on my third marriage. I got a 6-year-old daughter. I got a house that I never thought I would have. I
Yeah.
got a really good job. My daughter's wicked smart. And
Nice.
it's amazing. It is so amazing how, you
From
know,
hitting rock bottom and not
yeah,
thinking you were going to go anywhere, and thinking about contemplating taking your own life, to realizing that you have all this potential and it was
yep,
always there. And then now you have a great job, great wife, great house,
all of it. Yeah,
everything you've ever wanted, you've had it, you have it now. That's
yep,
awesome. So just because you hit rock bottom and have all these things going on doesn't mean things can't change.
right. And I owe a lot to that to, my battle buddy, as you will, my buddy I met in the Marine Corps,
Yeah.
because he stepped up and he got me the help I needed, no matter my reaction. He told me afterwards, he's like, dude, I didn't really care if you hated me the rest of your life, man, but you needed something at that time. And he stuck up
And he saw it.
and he
Yeah.
did. And I'm forever grateful for that. And, the stigma out there with people like, you know, asking for help or whatnot is horrible. It's horrible.
Yes, you're
And
right. And it's a culture, it feels like, that people don't ask for help and they keep it all in. It's like that warrior
yep.
mentality that I think we're trying to change in the military, but it's still there. And it's hard to break that.
Yeah, and it's tough because if you get to the point where where I was, where you didn't like yourself anymore
Yeah.
and you couldn't, that's the hardest thing, is getting past that and just saying, hey, I don't like myself right now. I
Yeah.
need to change. I need to change. And reaching out to somebody, and a lot of times you reach out to somebody, and nowadays everybody just thinks you're going for attention, and it's
Yeah.
sad because the DoD gave out a report third quarter for 2020 on veteran suicides, and for active service, we lost in 3 months. We lost 111 service members for suicide
In 3 months,
in
111.
3 months.
That's a lot. That's,
Yeah,
yeah, it feels like it's so unnecessary. Their lives were like, they could have had
yeah,
this, similar thing, they could have hit rock bottom and then picked themselves back up if they would have had the right tools and people, people looking out for them.
yeah,
So we're definitely trying to change that. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing with your podcast and being an
yeah.
ambassador for the Mission 22. Now, what do you do to, during your, work with the Mission 22 and to help change those stats?
Answer the phone, I guess.
Yeah.
I just, I try to do, there's like poker runs that go out here. There's events that go out here. I put a tent up, and anything I can, my phone's always on, anything I can. And I joined Mission 22 because of my podcast. I
Yeah.
started doing a little bit of research before I joined Mission 22. And I was like, I kind of like these guys, this organization. They don't seem to give out t-shirts when people call for it and asking for help and stuff like that. And my podcast is all about getting stories out there, because every veteran has a different story, and a lot of veterans go through suicide, whether they attempt it and or not. But you know everybody pulls through. I mean, not everybody, but the ones that can pull through, it's amazing what happens. So that's why the podcast, and I want to get stories out there, so that way one day some veteran that's comes across the podcast and hears a story that kind of relates to them, and pulls
Yeah.
them out of their funk.
They'll
And
see that it's possible, what the
right,
possibilities are.
so my first episode I did was about me, kind of thing, and my intro of my life. And a Mission 22 ambassador reached out to me and walked me through. He's like, hey, I think you'd be great, you'd be a great candidate, walk me through the whole process of becoming a Mission 22 ambassador. And luckily for me, which I liked, it was kind of a pain in the ass, but I liked it because it wasn't like, give me your email address and now you're a Mission 22 ambassador. It's, there's a whole application that you got to fill out. They call your references and stuff like that. They really try to ensure that you're true to the cause,
Yeah.
which I'm a huge fan about. And
Yeah. And so now, after they do all that background check and get all your information and references and all that, now are you available? So, like, if somebody's feeling like taking their own life, you're available. You're one of the people that they can call. Is that how it works?
well, absolutely. Every Mission 22 ambassador is like that, but as far as Mission 22, the organization itself, we have Mission 22 has its own mental health ward, and they do programs all over the place, ruck marches, camp outs, all kinds of stuff, and just they do raffles, they do it's
Community
all
building, basically.
yeah,
Yeah. Making you
getting the
feel,
knowledge out there that like, hey, listen, I know we lost 111 people in those 3 months last year,
yeah.
and that's just active duty. That's not your reserves and your veterans. That was just people constantly going to work every day as a vet, as a
Yeah.
military personnel, and nobody talks about how many attempts happened,
Yeah.
and that number. I'm kind of glad they don't talk about it because I know that number is going to be scary.
Yeah.
So Mission 22 is just getting awareness out there. Like, listen, it's better it's so much better if you don't end your story now. You
Yeah.
know, start a chapter 2 book, start another book on your life and just really try to get yourself through it. And for everybody out there that sees somebody going through it, you got to put aside how they're going to react and stuff like that. You just need to get them help. Sometimes it's not going to be easy. Sometimes they're going to fight you tooth and nail all the way through. They're not going to talk to you for a while, and they might not ever talk to you again, but at the end of the day, they're still with us. They're not a number anymore.
Yeah. And what helped you, and when you're in that situation, was that somebody went against what they knew you were going to be upset at first, and your
Yep.
grandfather called the sheriff, and they got
Yep.
you into a mental health facility, and then you hit rock bottom, and then when you're in there, you were able to reflect on what your
Yep.
next steps needed to be, like going to live with your grandfather and starting your life from scratch again, it sounds like, and then building it up.
Yep. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's an amazing, once you see that, it's kind of cliche, but once you see that light at the tunnel or the direction that you need to go and know that you don't like yourself, but also talk to yourself and say, what are we going to do to fix this?
Yeah.
It is such an amazing feeling afterwards. And, I didn't really start talking about that until I started doing my podcast. So like my wife never knew it.
Mm.
And, a lot of people didn't know it. My grandfather knew it just because, my buddy called him and everything else. But,
Yeah.
um, nobody knew it. I held it in, the guilt of not deploying and everything else, which is still not anywhere at the same level as people that deploy and they go through things and they see things but that was my issue with it. And ever since then, it's been amazing. It's been
Yeah.
amazing.
That's wonderful. So, is there any tools that you've learned along the way that help keep you in that mindset of, life is amazing. I'm like so lucky or, you know, blessed or whatever you call it to
Yeah,
have what you have in life.
man, it snowballs. It snowballs once you, like I said, like once you accept it and you give yourself the drive and you want to like yourself again and you want to like what you're doing and stuff like that, it just snowballs. You hit that one obstacle, you're like, all right, I broke through that barrier. What's the
Yeah.
next one? And then what's the next one? What's the next one? And it's, you know, you get this overwhelming feeling of just, I did this today. Tomorrow I'm gonna do that. That's my next goal. I'm gonna get
Yeah.
to that point.
Multiple successes in a
And
row. And then they just
yeah,
start stacking on each other like a snowball, like you mentioned.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Just watching yourself succeed in things gives you that courage to, try on new things. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, wonderful. So what is your career now that you're out of the military? What did you
So
end up
now,
doing?
so now, I went through a few jobs when I
Yeah.
got out, when I came back up to Massachusetts, but now I work in a federal building now
Okay.
where I get, I get good benefits and stuff like that. But it's just, it's amazing because now I'm like, I would have never, I thought myself to be destined for, I don't want to say anything bad about the people that do it because I know there's people out there that love doing it, but being like a tire changer,
Yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean? Like I was like, this is who I'm going to be the rest of my life. I'm going to live paycheck by paycheck, and you know
Yeah.
that, in 2009 when I went down that road, which and having the buddy that I have to step up to the plate and put his feelings aside and put his worries aside just to get me somewhere
Yeah.
is I would never be, like I said, if I didn't commit suicide that day, I was going to be living on the street somewhere in Arizona or something like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know? So
But somebody believed in you that you were worth more than that and that your life was worth something, it sounds like, when you didn't have that feeling at the time.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
he liked me enough that he didn't care about how much I hated myself.
Yeah. He saw that you were worth something, that your life
Yep.
mattered to a
Yeah.
lot of people, it sounds like.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
now I just try to tell people because now I'm on the other side of it. I'm a success story, as if you want to call me that, that's fine. So now that's what's really driving me to do this podcast and do Mission 22. And I'm so addicted to it now. I'm
Yeah,
like,
it's yeah. All this
it's just,
positive reinforcement, like helping other people, it's become like your mission in life, it sounds like, and helping
yeah.
get those stories out there so other people can see that there's more to life than, what their past they've been through.
Or what they're, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's been a couple of guys, this guy that was on, one of my episodes, he literally, he put a gun in his mouth, pulled the trigger and it never fired.
Oh my
And now
gosh.
he's doing amazing things. And it's, to hear other stories and it's just,
Yeah.
get the stories out there. Once you start talking, and I understand, like, if it just happened to you, you don't want to talk about it, you don't want to be out front
Yeah.
and open with people, that's fine. But just the end goal is to get you through it all. But once you're able to say, hey, listen, I went through all that to be where I'm at today
Yeah.
is amazing. Then when you start getting, your voice out there and you get that off your chest, and it's just, man,
Yeah.
I want to shake everybody, be like, no, what's going on? What's going on? Tell me.
Yeah, tell us your story.
Yep.
Yeah, get those stories out there, continue getting those stories out there, because that's really important for people to connect, and
Yeah.
it helps people feel less alone, and especially during the time of the pandemic where people aren't able to get together in community as much, and they're not able to do a lot of the things that used to get them through the day. No, that's really important, this podcast. Now,
Yep.
I heard of, have you heard of the Veteran Story Project by the Library of Congress?
See, I'm glad you brought something up like that. Like that's another
Yeah.
thing too. With the podcast, I'm like, I'm hearing about veteran help organizations that are literally in the next town next to me, and I've never heard of them.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
know?
They collect stories on veterans of any era, and they get them out there, and they're on the Library of Congress. They have their own webpage, and it's out there for their families. It's out there for, generations from now. People can look up at the Library of Congress under their last name and find out what happened to their great, great, great grandfather or grandmother. It's pretty cool.
Wow, I gotta look
Yeah.
that up.
Yeah. Veteran Story Project, Library of Congress. Yeah. So, well, wonderful. Can you think of anything that we may not have covered? We covered a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, and I just want to touch. I know you said something about being veterans being alone right now. So through my podcast, I have a open Zoom that I do on Friday nights. But right now, starting next week, it's actually going to be on Thursday nights. I put out there every Thursday night at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time at night, I put out a link that anybody can join, and it's not recorded, and you don't have to have your camera on. I don't care, but it's kind of like a virtual bar. I call it Happy Hour, the American Vet Podcast, and we get veterans from all over the US and all kinds of different stories. And like last week we ended up playing like poker through it. You know what I mean? It
Oh,
never,
cool.
yeah. So I don't want people to think that like it's a group session thing and it's a group, oh, poor me kind of stuff. But it's more or less just for people to interact with other veterans from other branches from other states. And
Yeah,
it's
and
just
just hang out like you're hanging out
exactly.
at a bar or something.
Yep. And the only
Yeah,
thing, my only rule for that is just, no politics, no hate, and just have fun,
I
you
like
know?
that. No politics. There's so much of that already.
Yep.
We don't need to deal with that more.
Wait, yeah,
Yeah.
that's free. Anybody can come on. I put links on it, Facebook and Instagram through the podcast itself, and
Yeah, and
come
I'll
on.
also put it on the show notes so that way people know where to get a hold of you and where to find that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's been really nice speaking with you. And I really enjoyed hearing your story, and what you're doing is just amazing. Thank you for all the wonderful work that you're doing.
Hey, you're doing it as well. It's things like this, collaborating with other people, getting stories out there. It's all part of the process.
Yep, exactly. Part of the process. Well, thanks, Dave. It's been really nice, and you have a wonderful day.
You've been listening to Catalyst for Change, and my name is Jessica Huckabee, your host. Join us next week for another story of resiliency. And please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, and feel free to leave me a comment or email me at catalystforchange20@gmail.com, or on Facebook, we have a page at Catalyst for Change Resiliency.